Hello friends, my name is Chrissy. Welcome to my channel, and today we're talking about tarot. Surprise, surprise. So I'm following up on a tag that Kelly from Truth and Story did originally, I think 2 years ago, and then redid around the new year, called The 10 Pieces of My Soul. And when I first saw this, I was like, oh, I don't know how I want to how I resonate with this, how I would even begin to discuss this. And then recently, Lisa Pepez did her response, and she kind of put it into categories with decks that represented pieces of her soul and the way that she worked with decks. And I thought that was really insightful and gave me a framework to work with. So I have picked the 10 decks that I use the most often, and the reasons why, and we're going to talk about them today. So we're going to start with just my casual chatter. So I think about this deck as the deck that I go to when I just want to have a chat, when I don't want to go deep. I don't want to necessarily have like a big insightful experience. Now, sometimes it brings that anyway, but my casual chatter is the Tarot Vintage. It took me a really, really long time to find a Rider-Waite-Smith that I resonated with, that agreed with me, that I didn't want to like avert my eyes from. I learned about this from the tarot diagnosis, and I kind of dig this deck. I'm able to get really clear messages, but it doesn't necessarily call me out. It's the person that it's kind of like the person that I text that's going to tell me, okay, Chrissy, really? But not give me a lot of, a lot of flack. So my casual chat deck is the Tarot Vintage. So the second deck we'll talk about today is the deck that I am calling my middle school best friend. So you know how we have that person, I don't know, not everyone does, but how sometimes some of us have that person that we've known since middle school. And we wonder, like, if I met this person today, would we still be friends? But the answer, that doesn't really matter, because they are your friend and they're a part of your soul. And that is how I view the Fountain Tarot. So this was my second deck. My first deck was the Wild Unknown, which I did not resonate with at all. This was the deck that I learned to read with. I look at it now and I'm like, I don't know that I would necessarily bond with this deck today. But at the time, this was, oh my gosh, I fell in love with this deck. And I have a deep emotional response to this deck. But again, like, I don't know if I came across it today, I don't know that I would think, ooh, that's a deck I want to read with. So I think about the Fountain Tarot as that friend I've had since middle school. I'm going to make a mess with these. I should have made room on my desk. I do not do that. So the next deck I want to talk about is a deck that I use for inner child work, and that is the Future Ancestors. Now, when I got this deck, I honestly thought that this was going to be the deck that I used to do ancestor work with. I had been really curious about that, but then when I got the deck, and the way that it speaks to me is completely inner child. One of my friends asked me how I knew that this was my inner child deck. Just because when I work with it, the voice that I hear in my head calls me by my childhood nickname. So I know that this is my inner child deck because it calls me Chrissy Ann. Most of my decks, when I'm interacting with them, I hear, like the comforting decks, I'll hear honey, or I'll hear sweetie in my inner dialogue. And this card is straight up Chrissy Ann. So that's how I knew that this was actually, even though it's the Future Ancestors deck, that this is my deck for inner child work. So when I got this deck and I'm like, well, so much for that. I was looking for something to do ancestor work with. And my ancestry is all European. And I found, very surprisingly, that I bonded with the pagan otherworlds. I have never felt so called to buy a deck that is completely not my aesthetic as I was with the pagan otherworlds. When I would watch walkthroughs and I'm like, oh, Chrissy, you have to have that deck. And it didn't make any sense. Like, this is not, I do love this sense of Six of Swords, but this is not my aesthetic whatsoever. It's just simply not. And I'd had it for a while. I didn't do anything with it. And then when the Future Ancestors did not land for Ancestor Work, I pulled this out and it's like, yep. Oh, Queen of Swords. So this is the deck that I use to connect with my ancestors. In a what do I need to know? Where is their wisdom in my genetics? Where is their wisdom in what I've inherited to use in this situation? So that is how I use the pagan otherworlds. And then looking forward to, I guess, looking back to past life work. I have done several group past life regressions with my friend Lauren. There's another one next week. I will totally be there. And I was using the Tarot for Mystical Moments. Tarot of Mystical Moments? Mystical Moments Tarot? You know, that one. I was using that one for past life work. But then it really found its space being a reader for me for clients. So I haven't used it but once. I'm excited to use it next week. I'm using the Cosmovisions Oracle as with past life work. Now, I know this is not a tarot deck. I have another Oracle deck in here as well. But because it is structured, I felt so funny. I've pulled 3 majors. Because it is structured like the tarot, I read it in another major. They're not in order, are they? No. I do read it with a tarot bend. So, and it's another major. This is kind of weird. Another major. Okay, finally. We have the Six of Lotuses, the Six of Cups. Friends, that was weird, right? I do examine the minors in a traditional tarot sense. I introduced that as part of the meaning as well. And then 2 3s in a row. I just think this deck is beautiful. I look forward to getting to know it, especially in the regression that I'm doing next week. When I saw this, I had to have it. I have the Prisma Visions, and this is just such a much more, another 3, a more vibrant color palette. And that's a Six of Lotuses again. And another 6. I'm all about multiples of 3 today. I'm gonna have to go back and watch this and see what these the random choices have been. It's a beautiful deck. And I haven't worked with it a lot. So I know it may seem a little, oh, Chrissy, you're bringing, you know, pieces of your soul into a deck that you haven't worked with much. But I feel that this just adds to the significance of past life work and the significance of what I can learn through regression, that this deck is one that I will only use for that and will have that sort of sacred energy around it. So I don't have a problem at all saying that this deck is one of the parts of my soul, because of the way that it resonates with me and because of the work that I know we will do together. All right, friends, we're halfway through. I'm going to do it. So next, the deck that I use for shadow work is the beautiful, beautiful Somnia Tarot. By the way, I thought for a while I was going to mod this deck, but in the recent email that I got from Nicholas Bruno, talked about, I don't think I'm making this up. Pretty sure the email, he talked about having the second edition of the deck being borderless, because he referred to it as no bleed, full bleed, maybe full bleed. Anyway, I looked it up and was like, oh, that means borderless. So I'm very excited to hopefully at some point in the near future have a borderless version of this deck. I honestly bought this deck simply to have in my collection because it was stunningly beautiful and I thought I'd never use it, and I use it all the time. I often go to this deck and just simply ask the question, what am I not seeing? What's in the shadows? And it's a great reader. It's also, it's kind of snarky. There was one day that, that I was asking, I felt pulled in a lot of different directions. And, you know, I didn't, and I'm like, what am I not seeing about the work that I'm doing? Where should I be focusing my attention? And I got the 8 of Pentacles. So just, Chrissy, shut up and do the work. This card also completely changed my understanding of the Emperor. I talk about that in a video somewhere. I don't know where. If you're curious, let me know and I can figure it out. But again, this is great for pointing out what I'm not seeing, what is hiding just under my nose. And that's kind of what I think of for shadow work for me. Isn't necessarily, and sometimes it is going deep into the shadows of myself, and sometimes it's simply what am I not seeing? What's in the shadow? Where am I creating a shadow, and what is that leaving me blind to? Next is my connection with spirits. This is a deck that I didn't think I was ever going to get my hands on. And I was able to snag Dawn Michelle of Boho Tarot, her copy secondhand. And that is the Majestic Earth Tarot. There's something about being in wide open spaces that brings me directly into the awareness of the presence of God. And I love this deck for its expansiveness, for being able to feel the wind in the trees and being able to smell the flowers, being able to hear the noises of the animals and the crickets, and really bringing myself, oh my gosh, what a card, into this space. What I love about this deck as well is the only card that is an internal landscape is the Hierophant. And something about the order and the tradition and just the history in a big old building. I love that this is an internal and an indoors landscape. By the way, I will say this every time I pick up this deck. I would love the Augenblick. And if anyone has a copy that they're not bonded with, please let me know. I feel like it would really resonate in a very similar way with me. But it's the wide openness of this deck that helps me. This is my favorite card in the deck, the 10 of Pentacles. That helps me to really connect with source from these wide open, vast places. This is a very powerful deck. I typically just choose one card. And it tends to be in a, what do you want me to see? What do you want me to hear? What do I need today? Sort of reading. I adore this deck. It's my friend. It's my connection to source. So we have 3 more left, and we'll go here. So one of these, the Did I count wrong? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm good. Okay. I am a Reiki practitioner, and working with my chakras is very important to me. It's a part of my daily practice. And I use the Color Mage Oracle. This is the other Oracle deck in this collection. I use this deck to connect in times where I either feel like I'm getting cloudy information from my chakras, or I just need a quick read. I turn to this deck. And what I tend to do is I will choose a card from this deck and a card from the deck that I'm going to show you next, and do a 2-card reading. So I'll get this deck will tell me what chakra I need, or chakras. In this case, I would go green and blue. I go heart and throat here. Or would I go teal? Or I may go throat and third eye. I don't know. There would really be a gut reaction to that. But this just gives me a little indication of what chakra could I pay immediate attention to right now. If I'm between sessions, if I'm on a small break, if I'm feeling really overwhelmed by my own energy, I will use this deck to connect with my chakras. Now, I mentioned modding earlier. I think I am actually going to modify this deck, because some of the, it's out of print, and that's the only thing that makes me nervous. But some of these, some of the keywords strike me as weird. Like there's the one I drew today, actually, says spinach, toughen your spirit. There are some days that today was one of those. Like I drew this in the 10 of Cups, and I'm like, I don't like this. I'm working in general to be more open, and this toughening up, I don't think that meets the heart chakra either. So and some days it lands, but today it didn't. So I'm thinking about cutting off the keywords and then cutting off the number at the top and ending up with a cute little square deck. But I'd have to get really brave and mod a couple of replaceable decks before I move to a deck that's out of print. But so to connect with my chakras, I use the Color Mage Oracle. And then what I do with the information that I get from my chakras is I go to my deck that represents Reiki energy for me. And this is my soul deck. If I could only keep one deck, it would without question be this one. And this is the Linescape Tarot. This is how I see Reiki. When I do Reiki sessions, this is a sort of, I know it seems almost a little vector, but this is, I thought I put all these upright. Oh, I did. That was a hangman. But this is how this sense of color blobs that make up a landscape. This is how I see Reiki in sessions with other people and with myself. So this, some of these are hard to see, so I'm not going to show you the hard to see cards. I can go deep in these cards. These cards read to me with the same level of depth as the Majestic Earth. I don't know why. Look at the Strength card. This deck just, it sits in my soul. Like I understand it. There's a second edition coming out where they change the backs. I do not like the backs on this deck, but I don't know that I'm bonded to this one, and I don't like some of the changes in the cards that I love, so I don't think I'll get the second edition. But I love this deck. So the Linescape Tarot is the deck that I go to for energy healing, for Reiki work, to bring cards into my energy work. Now, I did make this bag a little small, so I have to put it in phases. But it's okay. It still fits. It's nice and snug and safe in there. And then the final deck, the final piece of my soul was the deck that I use to connect with my guides. And this is another deck that is kind of like the Pagan Otherworlds. It is like 0% my aesthetic. When I saw, the first time I saw this deck, I was almost like, oh, this is offensive to my eyes. And then the more walkthroughs I watched, because I just have Tarot Tube on like in the background of my TV, on my TV when I'm doing all kinds of things. So Tarot Tube is always on. So the more walkthroughs I saw of this deck, I'm like, okay, I guess I have to have the dream visions. And this is actually the deck that I am using to study as I teach my first round of tarot school. And this deck plugs me right in to an energetic wisdom. It feels very much like my guides, where I get information. I think about this and the Majestic Earth as separate, where the Majestic Earth connects me to source, and this connects me to like my guides that have my lessons and my answers. The Majestic Earth is for comfort and for perspective, where this deck is more for lessons and answers and questions. And I adore this deck. There's something really powerful. Oh, the Page of Pentacles is just such a beautiful card. I'm sorry. I've got to flip through and find it for you real quick, because actually all of the pages are beautiful. I'm not going to be able to find it, and that's going to make me sad. Don't you love when people flip through their decks on YouTube and you just sit and wait? I know, I'm so rude. Look at the Page of Pentacles. And the Ten of Swords. You're already moving out. You walk underneath the 10 swords as like, you walk through the 10 swords to liberation. I love it. That's the 10 of Wands. I'm sorry, the 10 of Wands. But still that same recognizing your experience and your boundaries, and what is the newness, the relief is right here. Oh, beautiful. So friends, those are my 10 soul decks, the 10 pieces of my soul. For connection to my spirit guides, we have the Dream Visions Tarot. For my connection to source, we have the Majestic Earth. My connection to my chakras, we have the Color Mage Oracle. My connection to Reiki, we have the Lionscape. My past life connection, we have Cosmovisions, Prismavisions, Cosmovisions. My Shadow Work deck is the Somnia Tarot. My Ancestor Work is the Pagan Otherworlds. My Inner Child work is the Future Ancestors. My Casual Chatterbox is Tarot Vintage. And that annoying middle school friend that we love so much is the Fountain Tarot. This was a fun little tour. I hope you enjoyed it. I would love to hear if you use any of these decks differently in your practice. I think it's really interesting to look at how the same deck resonates with each of us differently. So I would love to hear any thoughts you have in the comments below. If you enjoy my content, like and subscribe, please, please, please. That'll help other people, help my content come across, all of the screens of other people. Have a lovely day, and I'll see you all next week.